Ever get this, like, uneasy feeling? Like, society's on this bullet train of progress, but nobody actually knows where it's going.
Yeah.
That's kind of the whole vibe I get from Jacques Ellul's The Betrayal of the West, you know?
Yeah.
So we're going to dive deep into his whole thing about reason, freedom, and some seriously wild connections that just hit different in, well, 2024.
You know, it's funny. The thing about Ellul is he wasn't just some random dude shouting doom from the sidelines.
Right.
This guy was a legit philosopher,
Right.
a scholar, knew his stuff about law, history, the whole 9 yards. He really got how the rest ticked.
Totally. And even though this book was written way back when, 1978, it's kind of freaky how relevant his ideas still feel.
I know, right?
Like, he'll say something about, like, the executioner becoming this archangel figure, right? In a society that's, like, crazy obsessed with being squeaky clean, technologically speaking.
Yeah.
Or how, and this is a trip, how our big chase for happiness, you know, the whole live your best life thing, could actually be a sneaky way we enslave ourselves.
It's wild, isn't it?
Yeah. Like, where do we even start with that?
Ellul was like the king of spotting these messed up paradoxes, right? Take reason, for instance.
Oh, okay.
He saw it as this driving force, like the engine behind all the West's big wins, science, tech, individual rights.
Right.
But also, and here's the kicker, its potential downfall.
Wait, so how can reason be both the good guy and the bad guy in this whole story?
Well, he says when reason becomes like the end-all be-all, when it gets so rigid it becomes a system, that's when it backfires. It actually starts to shut down real thinking.
And that's what he calls rationalism.
Bingo. And he thinks it can be used to justify some really messed up stuff.
So it's not about reason being bad in itself, but more about what we do with it.
100%.
Kind of like, I don't know, fire. Like, it can warm your house or burn it down.
Perfect analogy.
Oh.
And one way Ellul sees this burning down happening is through, get this, utopian thinking.
Hold on, you mean like trying to make the perfect society? Because on the surface, that sounds kind of nice.
Sure, on the surface. But Ellul would say, look closer.
Okay.
Utopias, they often come with a hidden cost. Conformity. Total conformity.
I see.
You try to create the perfect order, you end up with something crazy oppressive.
Wow. And this is where it gets really interesting, doesn't it?
He even compares utopian thinkers to, are you ready for this? Schizophrenics.
Whoa.
Both trying to force this, rigid order onto a world that's inherently, messy.
So both the utopian and the schizophrenic are, in a way, kind of trying to jam reality into this box that makes sense to them.
Exactly. And that, my friend, can be a dangerous, dangerous game, no matter how good their intentions might seem.
It really makes you think about all those movements today, the ones pushing for radical change. Like, are they aware of this trap, this whole risk of becoming the very thing they're fighting against?
That, my friend, is the million-dollar question Ellul throws at us. And it all circles back to this other big idea he tackles. Freedom.
Which, and this is kind of ironic when you think about it, is often seen as the total opposite of those rigid utopian visions, right?
100%. And for Ellul, freedom's not about just doing whatever you want, whenever you want. It's way deeper than that.
Okay. So there's more to it.
He'd say true freedom, it needs self-control. Needs a balance, this delicate dance between what we want as individuals and what society needs as a whole to, function.
So it's not a free-for-all kind of freedom. There are limits.
Big time. Ellul argues that when freedom gets out of control, when it tips over into chaos, it actually backfires.
How so?
It can lead to, a backlash, a rise of these even stricter systems that pop up, promising to, restore order.
It's that classic pendulum, right? Swings too far one way, then bam, crashes back harder in the other direction.
You got it. And that's why Ellul thought things like, social rituals, even good old-fashioned manners were so important. He saw them as, guardrails, helping us navigate the whole messy, complicated world of freedom without veering off the road.
It's funny because we often think of social norms as stuffy, old-fashioned, but you're saying Ellul saw them as these, essential structures, helping us actually be free.
Exactly. They prevent us from devolving into, chaos. And it's within this whole context of freedom that Ellul drops this crazy, prescient concept, the Grand Inquisitor.
Now, before we get too far, we're not talking about a literal person here, right?
But not all.
More like...
Think of it as a system, a force, one that comes along all nice, promising comfort, well-being, even happiness.
Right.
But all in exchange for one tiny thing, Control.
And I'm guessing, just guessing here, mass media plays a pretty big part in this whole Grand Inquisitor thing, doesn't it?
Oh, massive role. Ellul saw it as this sneaky tool, right? One that could shape what the public thinks, create this illusion of agreement where everyone's supposedly on the same page.
And we all know how true that is, especially now.
Oh, absolutely. And it makes it seem like there's no other option, no alternative to the system.
It's so insidious. It's like, yeah, sure, you're free to choose, but the choices are already made for you.
100%.
Yeah.
See, Ellul's arguing that even something as natural as wanting to be happy can be weaponized, can be used to control us.
Wow.
That it can actually be, get this, a form of enslavement.
Which is, I mean, you can't deny it. It's crazy relevant to, well, everything. Our world of targeted ads, algorithms that seem to know us better than we know ourselves. It's like he could see it all coming from a mile away.
It's true.
Yeah.
But then he goes even deeper into this idea of control, manipulation. But this time, he flips the script and talks about the truly poor.
The truly poor.
Yeah. And before you say anything, it's not just about, like, money. Not the way we usually think about it anyway.
Okay, so what's Ellul getting at then? What does he mean by truly poor?
He's challenging the whole definition, right?
Yeah.
He'd say you can have a ton of money, possessions, all that, and still be truly poor. It's about something else. It's about not having a voice, about being invisible, not having any real power or say in, well, anything.
So you could be, like, economically well off, maybe even living a successful life by society's standards, but still feel totally powerless, invisible.
Exactly. And Ellul argues that world opinion, the stuff shaped by the media, by those in charge, it often ignores these truly poor.
No matter how much money they have, right?
Exactly. It's like they don't even register. And here's where it gets really interesting. He then points this critique at the left.
Oh, wow.
And for context, Ellul considered himself a leftist.
So he's not coming at this from the outside. This is a critique from within, from a place of genuine concern.
100%. He felt that the left was, and this was tough for him to admit, betraying its own ideals.
How so?
Getting too caught up in structures, systems, too focused on getting power.
And in that process,
That forgot about the individual.
So in Ellul's eyes, the left, even with all the right intentions, was in danger of becoming a kind of Grand Inquisitor itself.
That's the heart of it. He'd say, good intentions, they aren't enough. Because even the best ideas, the noblest ideas, can go bad, can be twisted to justify some pretty terrible things.
Man, that is a lot to unpack. So how do we even start to navigate this world where reason can be good and bad, where freedom's amazing but also terrifying, where even wanting to be happy can lead us down a messed up path?
It's overwhelming, right?
Where do we even begin to untangle all of this? It's easy to feel kind of helpless with all this, just a cog in this massive machine going wherever it takes us. So how do we even push back? Where does, our own agency come into play?
That's the beauty of Ellul, man. He doesn't just, hand us the answers on a silver platter,
Right.
He gives us the tools to figure it out ourselves.
Yeah.
To think for ourselves.
Which honestly sounds way harder than just, do this, don't do that.
100%.
Yeah.
But here's the thing. It's also way more powerful in the long run. Ellul would be the first to say, be skeptical. Don't just swallow everything you hear, especially if it comes from, the big dogs up top.
So question everything. Governments, corporations, even those, super polished feel-good campaigns on Instagram.
Especially those. Remember the Grand Inquisitor. The second someone acts like they have all the answers, like they've found the utopia switch, red flag, my friend. Huge red flag.
Because those promises usually have a catch, right?
Always. And that catch is usually our freedom, our individuality, our ability to think for ourselves, to disagree.
Exactly. And that's why he was so big on personal responsibility. He truly believed change doesn't come from some big revolution, but from all of the tiny acts of, defiance maybe? The little things people do every day that add up to something bigger. Okay, so what do those acts of, mini rebellion look like? In today's world, I mean.
Oh, man. They're everywhere.
Yeah.
It could be something as simple as logging off.
Really?
Seriously, disconnecting from that nonstop fire hose of information.
You mean step away from social media, the 24/7 news cycle?
All of it. Just hit pause. Reconnect with yourself for a minute and with, the actual world around you, not just the digital one.
So it's about being intentional with our attention. Where are we focusing our energy? Is it serving us or just stressing us out?
Bingo.
Yeah.
Or it could be about actively seeking out different viewpoints.
Okay.
Like challenging your own biases, actually talking to people you disagree with.
Oh, man, that's a tough one.
It is, but it's so important.
Sounds like Ella was all about not just thinking for yourself, but also like actually engaging with the world in this really mindful way.
100%. And you know what else I bet he'd say? Don't lose sight of the individual.
The individual.
Yeah, especially those who are struggling. The ones getting pushed to the margins, whose voices are getting drowned out. Because real progress, it's not just about fancy tech or a booming economy.
It's about creating a world where every single person has a chance to like actually thrive, which is such a huge task and honestly a lot to process.
It is. It is.
If you had to pick like the one thing you want listeners to walk away with from Ellul, from this whole idea of the betrayal of the West, what would it be?
You know, I think the biggest takeaway is that the future, it's not set in stone.
Okay.
It's not this thing that just happens to us. We actually have a choice.
We do.
We can either just like go with the flow, become these mindless consumers of whatever information, whatever ideology gets thrown at us, or we can say, nope, not today. We can actually help build the world we want to live in. We can participate.
So it's a call to action disguised as like this deep philosophical analysis.
100%. Ellul, he might not have given us a to-do list, but he gave us something way more valuable.
What's that?
The tools and the courage to actually use our brains.
Yeah.
To question everything. To never stop fighting for something better.
A better future where reason and freedom, they're not just like nice ideas we talk about, but the actual principles we use to build our world, right? It's intense for sure, but it's also hopeful in a way. Whew. Okay. So on that note, I think we're going to have to leave it there for part 2 of our Ellul deep dive. We'll pick back up with his ideas about violence, technology, and a whole lot more right after this quick break.
I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like giving up, you know?
Yeah.
Like it's all just too much, too big to even wrap my head around, let alone actually change.
Oh, tell me about it. It's easy to feel totally overwhelmed, like we're just along for the ride.
Exactly. So where do we even start? How do we go from feeling powerless to actually like taking charge?
Well, that's where Ellul gets really practical. You know, he doesn't just leave us with a bunch of big, scary ideas and then peace out. He actually gives us some tools to work with, some ways to fight back against that feeling of helplessness.
Okay, I like the sound of that. What tools are we talking about? Like, what can we actually do?
One of the biggest ones. Pay attention.
Pay attention.
Yeah. To the world around us. But not just passively consuming whatever's thrown at us, you know.
So not just scrolling through our feeds, mindlessly liking and sharing. Exactly. It's about being present, aware. Like really looking at things, thinking critically about the information we're taking in.
Okay, so less reacting, more reflecting. I can get behind that.
And then, and this is a big one, be willing to question everything. Don't just take things at face value, especially if they come from, you know, the powers that be.
So governments, big corporations, all that.
All of them. Remember the Grand Inquisitor? Ellul would say, always be suspicious of anyone who acts like they have all the answers, like they've figured it all out.
Because those neat and tidy solutions usually come with strings attached, right?
Always. And you better believe those strings are usually tied around our freedom.
Our freedom to think for ourselves, to disagree, to actually be individuals.
Exactly. And this is why Ellul keeps coming back to this idea of personal responsibility. He truly believed that the most powerful changes, the ones that actually stick, they don't come from some top-down revolution.
Interesting.
They come from all those small acts of resistance, those little choices we make every single day. That's where the real power lies.
It's like that Margaret Mead quote. Never doubt that a small group of thoughtful, committed citizens can change the world. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has.
100%. It's about recognizing our own agency. You know, like, yeah, the world can feel huge and scary and totally out of our control, but we're not helpless.
So what does that look like in practice? Like, give me an example. What's one thing we can do today to start reclaiming that sense of agency?
Honestly, put down your phone.
Seriously.
Dead serious. Step away from the screens, from the constant barrage of information and opinions and clickbait headlines.
Just like unplug for a bit.
Even better, go for a walk. Spend time in nature. Have a real conversation with a real human being face to face. Reconnect with yourself and the world around you.
So it's about taking back control of our attention, of our time and energy, deciding for ourselves what actually matters.
Bingo. Because when we're constantly bombarded with noise, with everyone else's agendas and anxieties, it's impossible to hear our own inner voice.
Yeah.
To figure out what we actually think and believe and what kind of world we want to create.
Ellul was definitely onto something, wasn't he?
Oh, big time. And I think he'd be the first to say, This isn't about despair, it's about hope. Because as long as we're willing to question, to resist, to imagine a different way of being, then there's always a chance for a better future.
A future where reason and freedom aren't just empty words, but principles we actually live by.
Precisely. And that's a future worth fighting for, what do you say?
100%. And on that note, we're going to have to wrap things up. It's been quite a journey into the mind of Jacques Ellul. A huge thank you to our expert for breaking down these complex ideas and making them so accessible. And thank you to our listeners for joining us on this deep dive into the betrayal of the West. We hope you'll keep these ideas close as you navigate your own path in the world. Until next time, keep asking those tough questions, keep resisting the easy answers, and keep believing in the power of the individual to create real and lasting change.